Okay, we are here in biology class. We're going to be taking some notes on plant life cycles. And second period biology is with us. Mr. Wagner here. You should be on your note packet on page 9, annuals, biennials, and perennials. Let's talk about those, please. And there's that. Plants can have 3 different life cycles: annual, biennial, or perennial. Here's the definition of each of these. So an annual has a 1-year cycle. It grows, it flowers, it dies, and it's done. That's an annual. You have to plant it every year. Okay. A biennial is a 2-year cycle. Literally, it grows, it becomes dormant, then the next year it grows, flowers, and dies. So in other words, it takes like a whole year for it to kind of like get going, right? And then it grows, flowers, and dies, and then it's done. And then the last one is called a perennial. Perennial means like every year it comes back. It grows, it flowers, becomes dormant, grows, flowers, dormant, grows, flowers, dormant. Grass is an example of perennial. You don't have to plant grass. It dies in the winter, gets really cold. Guess what happens in the spring? It grows back. Yep. There's certain flowers like that that just grow back every year. There's a little chart there on your page talking about them, like a tomato plant. That would be an annual tomato plant. And it just grows, it dies, and then it's done. Biennial, it grows, dormant, and then it finally flowers the second year. That would be like a carrot. And then it's done. And then finally, the last one is the perennial, like grass or pyrethrum. Pyrethrum. See where my mouse is. I move my thing here. There we go. And it just grows every year, every year, every year. Yep. That's my perennial. Let's talk about seeds. Today in our class, we're going to have a seed lab. Those of you that are all virtual at home, you're going to be doing the seed lab virtually. We're going to actually have some seeds in class today, so let's look at that. Seeds form from ovules in the ovary. That's like our eggs, the ovule in the ovary. And they contain 2 main parts. It contains either the embryo or germ in a wheat. The germ is like, think of it as like the main content, the embryo. This is what's going to develop into the new plant. The wheat germ. And the other one is called a seed coat, which is a protective covering for the plant. 2 main parts, seed coat and embryo. Giving time for kids to write everything down. And there are external parts. There's the hilum. This is a scar on the seed plant where the seed attaches to the ovary. Okay, let me ask you a trick question, or this is not a trick question, but it's a hard one. If human beings were seeds, where would our hilum be? No. What? Yeah, your belly button. It's literally the place where you attached to the ovary that was in your mom. And where you attach, you're attached with your umbilical cord. So our hilum would be right there, the scar where we were attached to the ovary in our mom. So it would be your belly button. Yep. Place where we were attached. Silk scar on corn is where the silk is attached. We're going to look at that today on our lab. The silk scar. Silk is the stuff, when you get the corn on the cob and you peel off, you have all that little strands of stuff you have to get rid of, right? They all attach on the kernels. We'll show you where they attach. So here's an example of a picture of a bean seed. The hilum is right there. That's where it was attached. This is actually a really good picture, much better than what you're going to get with the actual live ones. The microphyll is right there. And then the radicle. The radicle is, of course, the part that pops up. Parts of the embryo. The pulmule. The pulmule is a tiny shoot that develops into the stem and leaves of the plant. That's the part that grows upwards, the pulmule. The radicle, part that sticks out and then grows down, that's going to turn into the roots. The cotyledon. I've also heard it pronounced cotyledon. Cotyledon is how I do it. Contains stored energy for the plant to use before it sprouts. Stored energy. What would human beings have for stored energy? What do we call stored energy on humans? Fat. Yeah, fat. That's where all the energy is stored. Yep. So cotyledon is like a bunch of fat that the plant can live off of. Yep, if it needs to, as it's growing. Because that growing process, remember when it's growing, it can't get nutrients from the soil. It can't really do a lot yet. It's got to live off of everything that it's got until it can eventually be big enough to eventually then take care of and feed itself. Good. And then finally, the endosperm is only in monocots. We have two different kinds. We're going to look at monocots and dicots, and they contain extra energy. The endosperm is extra energy for the seed. We'll look at both those in our lab. Endosperm, cotyledon, radicle, pulmule. Only in monocots for the endosperm, and it contains extra energy. And there's a couple of diagrams on your page. Well, that's actually what we're going to do with our bean. We're going to cut them open and we're going to look at them, examine them, see if we can identify all these parts. There's a good picture of one. The micropyle, the hilum, the scar. And then when I cut it open, that's kind of what it is, or it's actually going to break open. This is a bean seed. You got the pulmule and the radicle. The radicle, of course, excuse me, going to go up. Radicle is going to go down. The cotyledon, of course, is the energy there. And then in my corns, I got the seed coat, the endosperm, embryonic leaves, cotyledon, primary root, and that whole thing is the embryo. Think of like the germ, the thing that's going to develop into the next plant. So that's one individual kernel of corn. And then there's another picture for the monocot and dicot, the seed coat, embryo, stored food. The dicot again has two halves, two parts, di. We talked about those earlier in our notes. Monocots and dicots. All plants can be divided. Oh, we did not talk about it earlier. My apologies. We're talking about it right now, it looks like. Can be divided into monocots or dicots. Each group has four main characteristics. Four main characteristics. Four main characteristics. So monocot, an example is going to be, let's see. A monocot example is going to be corn. Mono means one, so it only has one cotyledon in the seed. That's where you get the word mono. It has parallel veins. Remember we talked about veins. That means they run right next to each other in the same direction. And the petals are always in multiples of 3. That's kind of interesting. You're either going to have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. Always that many petals. Always multiples of 3. And then it has a fibrous root system. We talked about that, where all the little fibers grow out. It's really good for holding onto a plant. Very good for that. Fibrous root system. Monocots. Dicots. Let's talk about dicots. So parallel veins, petals and multiples of 3, fibrous root system. And that's what it looks like. Count the petals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Has to be a monocot. Dicot, an example would be like our bean. And it has 2 cotyledons. Di, that's where you get the word di, means 2. Branching veins, so they kind of stick out. Petals in multiples of 4s or 5s. And they have the taproot system, like a carrot. So one big main root going down to the ground, maybe a couple little ones, but they don't have this fibrous network. It's just one big main root, just like a carrot. In fact, the carrot, you're eating the root. The orange part is actually the root that goes into the ground. These are dicots. Here's an example. Let's count the petals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 or 4, multiples of 5s or 4s. So 5, 10, 15, 20, or 4, 8, 12, 16. Always in those arrangements. Seeds are generally dormant until they germinate. Germinate is basically when the conditions are favorable to take place. Usually the main one is it's got to have lots of water. So I mean, a seed can actually be in a packet for years and years and years, dormant. And then you can get it in the right conditions and it's going to start to grow. Now some seeds can only last a couple of weeks, but some seeds can last for years. Has everyone got that? Make sure you got the notes on that one. Some seeds can remain viable. Viable means able to have life. Via is where the French word for life. C'est la vie. Life. So we get our word vital, vital signs, life signs. your heartbeat, your other things. What are his vitals? He's still alive, viable, able to be living. How a beet seed germinates. After the seed is planted, it absorbs lots of water. That's the big key, water. Water triggers chemical changes which cause the tissue of the embryo to swell and grow. The seeds that we're actually going to be doing in our lab, I've soaked them overnight. Actually, I've soaked these for 3 days in water. And that's going to make them nice and soft so we can actually look at what's going on. They're going to break apart easily. Can you imagine trying to cut open a hard seed? It's going to like chip and crack and all kinds of problems. So we soak them first. That's what gets them ready to go. Causes the tissue on the embryo to swell and to grow. The seed coat is softened by the water so the radicle and the pulmule can push through. We'll be able to see those better in our lab once we've soaked them, which we did. During this process, energy from the cotyledon is burned by the process of cellular respiration to provide energy for the developing plant. So it burns that stored energy so that cellular respiration can happen. Remember, that's where I burn sugar to get the energy that I need to do stuff. Cellular respiration is burning sugar to get the energy I need. And the plant grows quickly to anchor, the root grows quickly to anchor the plant. It's got to make sure it doesn't blow away. Got to make sure it doesn't get kicked up with wind or something like that if it's not too deep underground. Some of these seeds, remember, they just fall on the ground. They actually don't go underground. They're just kind of like lying on the ground. That's the natural process. When we plant things, we have to put them underground and then cover them back up, which is better. But remember, some of these seeds just fall out in the wild, and they just fall, and they're just laying on top of the ground. So they could get blown away. They could get all kinds of bad things happen to them. Animals can come take them. So they want to have that root grow quickly to anchor the plant in place. The shoot also grows rapidly, the part that goes upward. The cotyledon stays attached as the shoot pushes out of the ground. Remember the cotyledon, the stored energy. It provides energy and shields developing leaves from the hot sun. Remember, these are really young, immature leaves, and so if the hot sun is too hot on a hot day, they can actually get scorched before they're able to get lots of water and nutrients from their roots. So it's very important that they get shielded. Once the plant can go through photosynthesis, that's when they make their own food, then the plant can, cotyledon can shrivel up and dry off. Can shrivel up and fall off. Shrivel up and fall off. And there should be a picture in your notes on page 12. Picture on your notes on page 12. We're going to take a look at that. There it is. So there's the seed. The radicle starts to grow. There it is. Cotyledon is still there. Cotyledon, see how it's protecting the leaves? The root goes down. The cotyledon then eventually shrivels up and falls off as the leaves develop, and it can go through photosynthesis. All right, one more little section. Things that favor germination. Adequate supply of moisture. That's the key. Got to have lots and lots and lots of water. That's why lots of things don't get planted until rains come. You need lots and lots of rains. When I was in Africa, they would plant every year their corn. They would plant it around November, December. That's when the rains would come. But if you plant it like 2 weeks early and you don't get rains for 2 weeks, those seeds aren't going to make it. Or if they get a little bit of water and start to swell and then the rains stop, then you're in trouble too. Because then the plant's going to eventually die. It'll start to grow and then die. So you got to get it at just the right time where lots and lots of rain comes. It needs a lot of oxygen. Remember, oxygen is needed for cellular respiration. It's sugar, and you burn sugar with oxygen to make your energy. So if you don't have oxygen, that's not going to work. Got to have a favorable temperature. Favorable temperature. Proper soil conditions. The soil has to be good and full of nutrients. You can't drop it on like a beaten path where the ground is rock hard. It's never going to, nothing's going to ever be able to penetrate that. Their anchors, the roots are not going to be able to anchor the plant down. And finally, it's got to get sufficient sunlight. The sunlight is eventually what then triggers the photosynthesis so that the plant can start feeding itself. So if it doesn't get enough sunlight, it's going to be a problem. All right, this is all that we have for our notes on pages 9 through 12. There's a challenge question, and then all the review questions are there. 1 through 9 were due this Friday, and the rest are actually due, I believe, sometime this week or next week. I'm not sure exactly when it is, but do note that the test will be Monday at home. Test is Monday at home. Monday at home with the test. All right? So make sure you have all those review questions if they're not due before then, because those review questions will be a great study guide for the test. All right, going to leave you people at home with the notes, so take care, God bless. See you soon.